All right, welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast, Tony. How you going, mate?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me. Always flattered to be asked to come on these things. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, we appreciate you coming on. It's I guess I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and it's a bit unusual being on the other side. I know when I sometimes get asked to go on them as well, it's a little bit funky being on the other side. But before I get into all this, right, listening to you, and you started on radio and podcast, how did you get involved in that side of it all? When did all this start with you?
I started doing radio 22 years ago, 3 years ago, something like
Wow.
that. 22 years ago, I think. And I started, I was teaching at the Hank Johnson School of Golf in Sandestin, which was my first real good job. Um, as an academy instructor there, working for Hank and for Wayne Flint, who we still teach together. And Hank passed away a couple years ago. But anyways, I was approached by a guy there in town that was a sports talk radio guy, and he had in the States over here, Southeastern Conference football and all of that's a huge deal. And talk radio and sports talk was kind of in its heyday. I mean, in the beginning of its heyday. And he had a big Southern sports talk radio, Southern Sports Tonight. And anyways, I started doing the tip of the week.
Okay.
Or, he'd have me on at a tip. And then he asked if I wanted to do my own show in the mornings on Saturdays. And that's kind of where it started. He ended up in jail for stealing a bunch of money from a bunch of people. That's a long story. But anyways, that's how radio started. And, I did the radio and it was local. Then we syndicated it, and it was in a bunch of markets throughout the Southeast, Birmingham, Nashville on some great FM stations, and Mobile, Alabama. And, then we were in other places. And, then we got picked up by PGA Tour Radio, and at the time that we went off of PGA Tour Radio, we were the longest running instruction show that they had at the time, and I want to say we went off 4 years ago, four and a half years, somewhere in there, and anyways, when we went off the air there, or went off on XM, and I'd been doing it so long. I mean, to be honest, I was ready for something different. In my time, and produced the show. I think he enjoyed it and really wanted to keep going. But I was kind of burned out on it. I mean, doing a 1 hour radio, just my teaching had grown. I was traveling more with tour players and different things. Yeah. Anyway, so it was harder and harder to do, and I didn't enjoy it as much. And probably, to be honest, the radio show was getting stale, and so. I quit doing it, or we were going away with doing it, but I still had sponsors and stuff. And actually Lucas Glover, who I'd worked with for 5 years or so, I was with him when all of that happened. And, he was like into podcasts. In fact, he's kicking off this week. He's got his own XM show starting this week. Excited for him. And, anyways, he was like, you ought to try these podcasts. They're great, blah, blah, blah. And it was to me because, when you're doing radio, there's certain rules, and you got to do it at a certain time and all of that, and in the format. But with a podcast, you kind of make your own shit up. I mean, you just right, and stuff like this, you can text somebody, hey, you want to sit and knock something out, or I would, I might have 2-3 players together, and Greg Carton, a mental coach, we're all sitting there having beers. I was like, well, shit, this conversation's great. Let's go ahead and record it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it started. And I put it out, Cordy Walker, who does Golf Science Lab, started it with me and produced it. And then about a year ago, I took it over all from Cordy, and I have Clint, who there in Mobile does it and produces it for me. And I enjoy it. I enjoyed the podcast more than I enjoyed doing the radio there at the end. Because, it's more authentic. It's what I want to do. And if I have a week that we try to put one out a week, but sometimes last week we put out 2, probably won't get one out till the end of this week or first of next week. But, I think it's easier to do that with certain people's teaching and travel schedules and different things like that.
I would agree. It's interesting because I can, sometimes pump out quite a few, and then I'm like, oh, great, I've got some in the bank there for a while, and then you might have to go traveling and chase some players or whatever you have to do, and then all of a sudden you're like, crap, I got none left. I need to get in contact with some people and record some more. But let's move into a little bit of coaching. I want to lead to, you've been coaching, you're still coaching Lucas Glover, is that right?
No. Lucas, he works with Jason Bale now. Lucas and I worked 5 years, had a good run, made a tour champion, and then we split a year after that. I think that I would still say Lucas. I saw him on the range today. We joked for 5 minutes or so. Great relation. In one of the most, I learned way more from him probably than he learned from me. He's a great champion, a major champion. He's a great player. He also, during that period, was a fantastic friend, a confidant, somebody that I talked to most every day. But as you learn, you learn, in this business, you're hired to be fired. As part of it, runs its shelf life, right?
It does, and yeah, I understand that, and I've spoken to lots of guys when I have been fired, like friends of mine and I say to them, I'm trying to find out why, and they're like, don't worry about it, it just happens, and people, I guess, they kind of just get enough information, and the grass is always greener, they think, right, as well at the same time. But tell me, do you I was interested to kind of know the reason why I asked you that about Lucas, and obviously you're still friends with him. Such a fascinating last year, right? How he's just
like fantastic golf, I don't look at his stats like I still follow him because I told him when we quit working, and I said, I'm still a Lucas Glover fan, right? You can't work for somebody for 5 years, travel all over the world, and stay at their house and have dinner a gazillion times and drink red wine together and be friends and not still care about a person and hope that they do great, right?
Yeah.
But unbelievable year last year. Couldn't be proud of him and what he's done. Obviously, the 2019 when he made the tour championship, was the year and a half that he had used the arm lock, and really, really helped him at that time with short putts. Obviously, he's struggled with those. Lots of players have. I think his resiliency as a player, how he's gone through that and figured that out multiple times is impressive. Shows what a great player and a great champion he is. I don't think many people realize how hard he works on his game and his craft. Impressive. But then obviously went away from the arm lock for great reasons. His speed control, didn't probably make as many 15, 20 footers as he needed, etc. when you looked at statistics. And, but then he's gone to the long putter and to that lab, I believe it is. And, he's a great ball striker, and whoever teaches him, he's going to be a good ball striker, right? And they've obviously done a great job. Obviously putting and short game, he's a really good chipper, but like putting and stuff is obviously the difference between being top 30 in the world or whatever. And
yes, no, he's a phenomenal player. I love that, like you use that term kind of resilience there, and I love when people aren't also, I'm not going to say afraid to reinvent themselves. Like I could say that, or use it a different term, but kind of certain, not accepting the fact of where they are at that point in time. They're like, oh, I used to be like this, and now I'm not anymore. It's like, hang on, I want to get back to that. I want to get back to where I was and try and get better than I was. So I think that's really kind of cool when you see someone like that from that position. They're not willing to accept where they are and look back at their career. It's like, I'm going to get back to there. And yeah, he's just been phenomenal. He's been playing so well. It's been great to watch. In my coaching, Tony, right, I like to kind of easily separate the two, I call it two entities in the golf swing, right? One being arms and club structure, and the other one being the body pivot, right? And I like to try and work one of those, I guess I'm going to use the word separately, and I like educate people on how each parts of those components can influence the other part of the component. And when I watch a lot of your coaching, and been watching you on Instagram for such a long time, I kind of feel like you're the master of the body pivot, and that you kind of focus a lot of attention around the body pivot. Is that, would I be mistaken that you do put a bit like I'm going to say maybe more of a general emphasis on that than what I have seen around the body pivot?
I think there's a lot of teachers that teach pivot. I mean, and I think, I think that, we had Butch was on my podcast a week ago, Justin Parsons, and we did this golf coach development thing, and we recorded it, and he talked about, the ball and the equipment's changed and forced people to cover it more, rotate through. Obviously, you look where I started teaching in my teaching career, the technology had already kind of started getting that way 20 years ago, right? And so, but my foundation was that the pivot or the rotation of the body was the engine of the golf swing. That's what I was taught. And I think people go down. I mean, look, in the beginning, we're all teaching to try to figure out how to make a living, first and foremost. Say, you're doing it because you love the game and you're passionate about teaching, which we are. But it's also, you're trying to survive doing it. If we're going to do things and go down ways that we tend to have more success with.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, Hank had told me, look, teach. Back, like I said, I'm at a beach resort. I'm teaching mostly chops. I mean, not people that are very good. And you're teaching, he'd said, well, hey, and at this point I'm broke. I mean, I got a repossessed car. I'm living in a dump. And he's like, hey, if you can teach people to get their grip on there, get the face square, and you can teach them to make as good a pivot back as they can, and turn through as good as they can and keep improving that, they'll start getting improved contact, and you'll teach $50,000 a year. And I was like, shit, $50,000 was a lot of money to me back then. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's not now, but so I went down that road, and people started getting better, and I started becoming popular. And, I was always trying to figure out why were people getting better. And that led me down to buying one of the first swing catalysts. Yeah. And it was pretty clear when you put good players on it versus, chops, for lack of a better word. Like, that how the difference in what the pivots and the traces look like. I mean, it was, and to me, it was like the reason I became such a big, obviously there's options out there for lots of people, and I'm not a damn infomercial for swing catalysts. I've been with them I bought the second one in the United States, and but like, it was real easy to say, like, hey, and show a guy, like, hey, here's where your rotation stops and you back up, or here's where you get way out on your toes and why you can't, what I'm saying? Like, so I just started going down that hole. So, and then I had some guys that got good, and I was just teaching them, pivot. And, now I would say that I teach more than pivot. I totally understand everybody says I'm the pivot guy, but I'm getting my teaching's pretty simple. I want a square club face, relatively square. In a perfect world, obviously there's, I teach tour players and LPGA players that, don't always fall in this, but, perfect world, I'd like a pretty good square club face, club that swings relatively on the plane, and have a really good.
And pivot. What about if you're measuring the body pivot, say from down the line, right, and you're just looking, at the pivot? Do you, like with a mid-iron, are you kind of the one that, do you but do you look for that 90-degree between spine and shoulder alignment? Is that kind of your baseline, or when you're touching pivot, or are you kind of identifying each pivot to match each person's kind of swing type a little bit? Because Glover, right, he's barely got any rotation on the way back, right? He's quite short, I think, if I think of it.
Yeah. Short, he doesn't turn his chest as much, but 2019, I don't know what he does working out. Yeah. We tried to get right hip deeper, and he did a lot of work with Colby Touye in the gym. Yeah. obviously very close, and because to me, a draw, a hook, and you got to get to the inside of the ball. Pretty hard to do that without, right? You know, so but I think, look, I think everybody's body's different, and you got to match up the pivot and how and what they can do. I think our job is, but I think golf's a rotary sport, and I think the way you do it, I mean, if you're going to throw a football or a baseball, you'd wind into your trail side, and your lower body would unwind. I mean, I don't think that's different no matter who the hell you are.
Agree. Yeah, right? I agree.
I think my coach or a teacher is to develop their ability to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm outspoken. I think a lot of this bullshit that's come along about, oh, this guy measures, so we're just going to leave him on his lead.
Yeah.
Like, nobody does that. That's
I
good.
know.
Okay. I know. Like, to me, that's not coaching or teaching. That's not developing. I mean, I want to develop people. I want to make people better than where they were when we started.
Yeah.
And I don't really I probably shouldn't be saying all of that. I don't really give a shit about some number on a track, man. If the speed number goes up 4 miles an hour because we got them to jump.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but can they control their golf?
Yeah.
Ball?
Yeah.
Can they play off than they were when they started with me?
Yeah.
Right? That's ultimately what I'm trying to do. And that whether it's making it better, whether it's making their club face better, educate what they need to do going through.
When you're talking there about that, when we're seeing that measuring stuff, like obviously we won't mention any names, but they're measuring and they measure someone so quickly and they go, okay, that's where you are. And I think to myself all the time, like, we're putting these people in these categories very quickly, and we haven't even asked their body to move a certain way, and we haven't measured if they did move a different way, if it was better. Because why are you accepting the fact that someone's there? If it was another component of the golf swing, you wouldn't accept the fact that they're staying in front bend too long. You wouldn't, they're staying front bend too long. Okay, that's where they're going to be. It's like, well, hang on, have you actually taught them to extend? Or so when I see that body pivot stuff too, and I think, well, to me, a lot of people's body pivots might not be moving ideally because A, they haven't been asked to move in a certain way and their body's just kind of adapted to it. And B, I think as well, like a lot of time if people are getting quite short in their backswing, they're kind of compromising their arm to try and get them around to come, like what you say, more from the inside, right? So yeah, the whole measurement thing I find a little bit too quick in my opinion, because you're not really testing, in the environment. You're not testing it.
Well, I mean, I just think too, like a lot of people measure a certain way or don't do certain stuff because there's physical, they don't have strength, the mobility or the flexibility in a certain area, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't that we can't improve that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not the 80-year-old guy who's just playing once a week. So, I mean, that's a different animal. But for the person that comes to you or me, and they're like, hey, man, like I'm a 12 handicapper and I want to get good. You know what? You're going to have to learn to turn behind the sunbed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe, maybe you don't have enough stability into your trail leg or enough strength or whatever. But like, why can't I take you to Colby or to Aaron or Morgan and get them to get you a program that improves it? Right. Like, so that, but that's what I think, and look, but in the end, I mean, I think like we measure and do all this shit, but really we're trying to teach somebody to turn behind something, unwind, and deliver the club.
Yeah.
Right. And there's obviously more to it. We can but like in the end, that's what we're doing,
Yeah.
Until we can do that, I mean, I don't know that a lot of the other shit matters a lot.
I agree. And the body is so adaptable, right? So if you move a certain, if you're not putting it under duress or under a certain way, your body just adapts to it. Like people think, oh, I'm getting old or whatever it is. I go, well, hang on. You just have stopped moving for 20 years like you did when you were a kid. It's got nothing to do with age. You just stopped moving, right? So you got to put yourself through that little bit of training like you do with Colby. And also, if you want to help explain someone like with body pivot, say we're talking people listening about getting more, say, chest rotation, more depth so we can get those hands further around, I'll say to people, if you want to move the ball, say, more on a draw path, so more into out, we need to put some of into out kind of pieces within your golf swing that's going to allow us to do that. Currently, right now, you have a shorter body pivot that's leaving your hands out and then matching up with your open face. You've got two out to in kind of categories in there. We need to shift them to be more draw bias, and we're going to move your body in a certain manner to allow that to try and happen the easiest way possible. So, yeah, I think, settling for a poor body pivot is going to make life extremely tough with the arms and club structure.
I mean, I think as an industry, like, I see a lot of young teachers out there that are, they're worried about all these different things, and they haven't even fixed the person's grip.
Yeah.
Right? And, or they haven't, or their posture's terrible, right? Like, or the ball's in the wrong spot. So, I think, like, before you go buy a damn TrackMan, you ought to learn how to put a grip on and get somebody balanced.
Yeah. I have the rubber grips in my backpack I take to work. I make sure I have half a dozen rubber grips in there in case I need to give out so many during that day, and I load them in there, the right grips, and they go to work with me every day, and I'm handing them out. I go to the pro shop, getting them fitted for you. Go to the pro shop, getting them fitted for you. Yeah. And I think it's extremely important. And we're talking about young golf coaches there. It's when some of them, I help some, through Skillus, a couple of through the platform, a few coaches, and they show me what they're doing with the student. I go, yeah, I understand what you're doing, but if you fix their bottom hand grip, or, if you just got them to turn a little bit better, your problems would be solved pretty quickly. Yeah.
Right. Amazing too, to me, like, I use those balance discs, those inflatable little they're blue here, pods that people can stand on, that are in workout. You're like, you put somebody on that and they get balance, the posture themselves. Yep. It's amazing how you get somebody postured correctly just doing that. I had a member at Old Palm the other day. Really, all I did for an hour was posture. But it was like, like, everything got better. His club speed went up, the contact got better, a little less curve, more predictable, blah, blah, blah. Like, all we really did was fix his posture, and it really enabled to make him a better move, right? And so, I just think that, and I'm not being critical of young to anybody. I'm just saying that, like, I think that with all of this technology out there, sometimes we jump to stuff and we skip over the stuff that, that was hammered into me when I started, when I started, hell, my job was to fix everybody's grip when, we were doing a golf school or whatever, or, and teach them how to hit a chip and have a good impact, all of those things, and I think we get to run, and I watch a lot of the stuff just like you on social media, and you see some, and I know everybody's trying, it's social media has obviously changed our profession dramatically, but like it's changed, you should still be able to do the basic stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a little bit of a lost art in that, to be honest. I do Skillist as well. I do a little bit of it. I dabble in it. I'm not near active like you and a lot of people, just because it's like I'm a very people centric, hanging out, like it's just not as fun to me. I'm older, right? I'm just way older than dirt. So, but like you see people and they're like, well, I've been taking lessons and I can't figure out, why I'm hitting whatever. It's like, well, shit, your left hand's here, your shoulders, and the ball's a foot too far back. I mean, where the hell do you think it's going to go? Like, well, and then I'm always like, how have you been taking a lesson for 3 months from somebody and they not ever brought up your grip or your ball position, right? Yeah. Those are the ones that like, you see a guy. I saw this guy one time teach at this public golf course in Birmingham. I was sitting there in a cart, and this guy's taking everybody to the top. And the director of instruction there is a buddy, one of my good friends, and we're sitting there watching. I'm drinking a beer, And this guy, all he's doing is he's taking this guy's, he's trying to get his hands way deep behind him, right? I mean, this guy's got the ball like 3 inches inside his back foot. His right hip, he's right-handed, is shoved way outside his right leg. And his left hand is just like, it's in the palm.
Oh, shit.
And you're like, and I'm like, this guy's paying good money. I don't care if it's $40 or $300.
Yeah.
It's good money, And I just, I was like, I just shook my head. I was like, and yet, like, I mean, this guy's going and putting something on Instagram, and you're like, man, like, that's just not good.
Oh, because he's taking a screenshot of the person at the top.
Right. You know what I'm saying? But, like, that's what right? And Brian Manzella, him and I will disagree on a lot of things. He's a great teacher, but like he always talks about, like, man, let's post some shit where you're really teaching.
Yeah.
Right. Like anybody can take some still shots or whatever, but let's see it. So anyway, I guess I'm old school.
Well, yes, and I had an example yesterday. I do a big in-person day here, like 2 days a week. At my club where I coach out of, and had a guy come to me yesterday, and you could see he was frustrated. He's had instruction for the last few months, and he just wasn't getting anywhere. He was in his terms, and he rocked up to me, and I said, I'll test you. I'll see where you're going. And all of a sudden, I've seen he's got this huge right hand under grip, right? So far under. His left hand's right on top. His right hand's so far under. And I thought, I've seen this work. I'll let it go. You know what I mean? Like I'll watch it. He tops the first two. Next one goes over the right fence. So I had to recalibrate my GC quad to steer it further left so we weren't going to go to the fence again. So I did that. And then the next one goes under the 9th fairway, which is adjacent to the driving range. Well, the 8th fairway. So.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I took his 7-iron away, grabbed his pitching wedge, and I said, hit some chip shots for me. And he went top, left net, right net. So you can't chip it. And I said, have you ever had anyone talk about your grip? And he goes, nah, my last coach just keeps talking about my knee flex. I went, your fucking knee flex? I was like, mate, that's not going to help worry about your striking. And so I just had him, him chipping it with a pitching wedge. And by the end of it, we had him hitting hip-to-hip pitching wedges further than he was hitting a 7-iron. And just by getting his grip on top. I was like, well, here's a grip, right, rubber grip. Go put it on in the pro shop. Come back to me in 2 months, or whatever you want to. Come back to me. Right. And he hit, I think he said in his words, that's the 10 straightest shots I've hit, and they're all in a row. I was like, okay, great. And it was just from changing his grip a little bit, and the poor bugger had been jumping around everywhere. You know what I mean, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, like people, I mean, they overlook it, like, and you see these things, and they're like, or they're working on, like, I'll see somebody, and they're like, we're working on whatever. I mean, the fab, like they're trying. Oh, I'm too steep. Yeah. Like, so they get into that. I do agree with, like, Brian. Like, I mean, everybody's like trying to shallow stuff out or whatever, and it's like, man, like they haven't even put the guy's hands on there right, or his like, I'm big obviously on posture, like, I mean, shit, like, man, like, get the guy balanced, give him a chance.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously, I think the hardest people to teach are like the real successful business guys that never played any sports, don't have any athletic ability, right? They're some of the most difficult ones. Because, like, if you get a guy that's a good athlete to me or has been a good athlete, there's some relationships between other sports. Yeah. And I also think they understand also that like playing an athletic sport takes a process, especially if they've been a good athlete, and as we get along in teaching, a lot of times we'll have access to somebody that's been a great athlete. Like, those people generally understand the process it takes to get good, right?
Yeah.
But like you'll get Joe Schmo's an accountant and never played any sports, but like so it's harder. But like, man, like, those are the guys you really got to get the grip and posture, because like they don't have enough athletic ability to recover, or time.
Yeah, I reckon with the athletes, Tony, it's for me, when I separate the two entities, right, like I said at the start, like body pivot and arms and club structure, I feel like you can get the athlete so quickly with their body pivot moving appropriately. And then you've only got one facet to worry about, which is just getting this grip right and the club face management right. So it becomes a lot easier. But when you get like I think you said, Joe Schmo or the businessman there, he hasn't moved his body properly ever, and he hell of a hell hasn't got much, let's call it hand-eye or adaptability in regard to holding a club. So he's got two facets to try and get right, and that's when it gets really difficult. But when someone shows up and they got good grip and good club face and a poor pivot, it's okay. But if someone's got a good pivot and poor club face, it's okay, because we can work on just one component and get you going pretty good straight away. But mate, I couldn't agree more with you there. It's
and I mean, I think that but I just think our job is to develop and to make people better than they are when they get to us, right? And I think that I just don't think there's many opportunities or many things in life where leaving somebody the same and taking the easy way out is probably the best thing, right? So leaning somebody on their left side or just letting them slide their ass all over the place back in the thing that, they're just way better if they have 90% pressure on their trail leg. And I think that too, if me or you wanted to find an example of anything under the sun, we could find a tour player that's done it and been really good, right? Because they're freaks.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the best players in the world. They're great athletes, especially now. They're great. We could find an example, but that doesn't mean we should teach this 14-year-old kid who wants to be really good to do that.
Yeah.
Just because they don't have a pivot or they got a bad grip, so I think that, I don't know, I've been on my soapbox a good bit, I guess.
No, that's all right. Well, my friend... my friend I had Andreas Carli on last episode, right? So Andreas Carli from Denmark, and he said to me, Toby, if Jordan Spieth was a 12-year-old and he came to you, would you change his grip? And I was like, probably.
Probably would.
I probably would have.
That was you got to give. Certainly, when Jordan had that down period, Cam took a lot of heat, right? You got to give him a lot of credit. You got to give him a lot of credit for not messing Jordan up, and you got to give him a lot of credit for where Jordan is now. And you also have to give Jordan a lot of credit for hanging in there through that down period, because there's not a lot of players that stick with somebody, right? And I think that's why Jordan is so great, though, is is sticking with understanding there's going to be ups and downs. No matter how good a player you are, you're going to have a down period, and you've got to weather those downs, right? It's easy to fire the person in front of you and think there's better information. That's the easy thing to do. And sometimes the coaching change works. We've all seen it. But, man, more often than not, it doesn't work, especially for somebody, probably not as much with the guy that's been out there for 20 years. But for the young ones coming up that have worked with somebody for a long time, right? When you change that voice and you change that message that they've heard since they were a kid, I mean, that's a dangerous thing.
Very foreign, isn't it? It comes very foreign.
So it's always interesting. There's obvious, again, like I said, there's always successes, but there's also people that have gotten ruined.
Yeah. And it's that stuff when Jordan Spieth, right, when he it was like the hottest young junior golfer ever. I'll never forget when he held that bunker shot to get into that playoff, I think, to win that PGA. I'll never forget it. And then when he wins the Masters, no one was talking about his grip, and all of a sudden he has a downfall, and all of a sudden it's his grip's fault. You know what I mean? He's been holding that way since he was winning everything as a kid. So, it was interesting to kind of watch that. And it's easy to jump down people's throats when they're down, and jump on top of their necks, I guess you could say. And like what you're saying there is it's not so much giving what we would normally see is giving credit to a technical change or a credit to a changing coach. It's a credit to the resilience and the acceptance of that downfall and pushing forward, which I think is very difficult to measure because you can't really see it. You can't measure it as such. It's
right.
No good question. Character.
And I think you look back on some of the, you'll look back as you get older, you will too. Like you look back and or what are some of the better coaching and teaching jobs I've done? And they're not always with the person that's won the most or had the most success. Because a lot of times those guys were really good, and we just kind of, or girls, and we just kind of kept the steering wheel steady, right? Sometimes players just need somebody to hold the steering wheel a little bit, right? And then there's players that need to make some changes. And there's players that need to hear, the same thing a different way, right? There's a lot of different situations out there, but that's why I think Butch said on my thing, and lots of great. But like you teach the guy in front of you, and to get better, and you got to. Sometimes it's taking somebody and walking them over to the short game green and teaching them how to hit a 30-yard pitch.
Yes. Well,
sometimes just teaching a player how to hit a fairway finder driver that they're not going 120%, right? Yes.
Do you think there's a better coach ever than Butch Harmon who can coach technical things so simply in regards to his terminology and the wording? Like, I wish Butch Harmon, but I hope Butch Harmon towards the end of his career, and I hope coaches get to listen to him coach and talk, because he's such a great communicator in a way where it doesn't sound sciencey. Like, obviously we've all studied it and we love the biomechanics and love getting nerdy, but the message he gives to his players, it seems to me, what I've heard, is obviously second, fourth, fifth hand, is, I'm going to use the term simple. Would you agree?
He's a genius. I mean, he's the best that's ever been, probably the best there ever will be at, taking a complex game and making it simple.
Yep.
And my old mentor used to say, golf's a really simple game. It's just really hard to do. Right. And
that's good.
But but Butch is but I think that his genius is his ability to read the player and figure out, how you reach that player. Like, does this guy need to be kicked in the ass? Does this guy need to have your arm put around him? Is it, what's the one thing I can give this person that's going to make them believe, right? And I think that when you've had the success he's had, certainly he's had great players, but that comes with then now where I think when people go see him, shit, if I took a lesson from him, hell, I would probably think I'm going to win the next damn thing I can play. Shit, his track record gives you a pretty damn good chance, right? So I think that, he's a genius with that. And I agree with you. I hope that, what's he, 80 or 82 years old? I mean, he, at this time of his life, I think people should be appreciating and trying to learn as much, right? And I've had the good fortune to teach, I think, 2 golf schools with his brother Billy, and they were phenomenal. Yeah. And Billy's equally as much of a genius, and his thoughts and that come from their dad and his success and how you play the game. And I mean, it's wonderful, right? And again, we're at an age where obviously I'm getting older, they're getting older. Like, we should be trying to get as much of that info as we can,
Yes. I love that. I love that. Hey, Tony, before we finish, I'm going to let you go around and have some dinner, right? Or whatever you need to do. I have a segment in here, which is the Back to Basics putting segment. So it's the mirror that is invented by Grant Field and Richard Woodhouse. It's got the nice Pro Path mirror. It's got the arc on it, about 15 degrees, which is halfway between 12 and 19 degrees, which is average on the PGA Tour. So it's the Back to Basics putting segment. Do you have a go-to putting exercise or drill or something that you've seen one of your players use that you like to kind of share with your students, or you'd like to share with us today in regards to a certain mannerism? What is it?
The 2 things I focus on putting are line and speed, right? And I'm still old school. Like, I still like a chalk line from 5 feet for straight putts. Put a couple tees to measure just outside the width of the putter, and where they gotta, you gotta go through those tees and be able to roll that ball down that chalk line.
Yeah,
and I think if and I think that helps fix a lot of things, right? I love those mirrors and those things because it gets the eyes and the posture in the right place. But I'm still let's go make some 5-footers on a chalk line, learn to roll them down that line. And then, I like super simple speed drills really not to a hole. I like them to roll 30-footers from like 30 feet, 40 feet, whatever, towards the fringe and just trying to get them as close to the fringe as they can.
Yeah.
Like you take the hole out of it,
Yeah.
but where they're totally focused on speed. Like those are kind of like, especially if I'm with a junior and stuff, like let's start there,
Yeah.
right? But my one advice that I always tell a lot of my good young players is like every time I've been fortunate enough, like I go to the Bears Club or you go to these clubs, Old Palm, where there's like a bunch of tour players, or you walk on the putting green at the Grant Thornton or whatever it is, you see if you go to a couple, if you went like 3 weeks in a row to an event or whatever, or 3 different months, you would see most of the time the same players doing the exact same thing. And I would tell, whether it's that Matt, that's your sponsor that's great or whatever it is, if you want to be good, find 1 or 2 things that you like that work for you and keep doing them.
Yeah.
Right? Just doing them makes you better, right? Obviously you got to get with your teacher and say like, hey, let's find me 2 things I do, and I'm just going to keep doing them every time I practice, whatever that is, for a year. Let's see how better I get. I think most people don't get better because they jump around from thing to thing.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's nothing wrong with doing something. There's nothing better than the analogy of like when you can get given a gym program from, say, Colby and go do it one day and go, where are my abs? It's like, well, hang on. How about you go do this for a while and don't give up on it, and that will come.
Correct.
But when you talk there about that that string line and the 2 tees there outside the putter head, like there's that'll be great for the rest of time because you're working on centimeters of contact and you're working on is the face square at impact, which is going down the chalk line. Like, tell me, there's not too many other things you need than that, to be quite frank.
Right. I mean, if you can roll it dead down a chalk line or down one of those little rulers for 3-4 feet and hit it center, I mean, you can figure out how to putt.
Yeah.
Right? I think that people, the better they get at that, then they become better. And then the better they get at speed, the better they start to read greens. I know Ralph Bauer's got a great app out there, Tour Read, and it does a lot with, make people read better, and then they putt better. But I mean, I think you got to have good fundamentals to be able to start it down your line first.
Yeah. And what great feedback you're getting there too, Tony, so if you're using a ruler, is you're getting great feedback if the ball's jumping off to the right or to the left, or if you're hitting the right tee or the left tee.
Absolutely.
You're getting immediate feedback. And how many people will say to you, my practice swing is good, and you go, well, hang on, you're only saying that because you can't measure if it's shit, because there's no ball in the way, there's no result. And when what you're creating there is an environment of chalk line, 2 tees outside the putter head, you got immediate feedback, and you can find that if your putting stroke is shit or good. I like that.
Exactly. No, I think like same thing with instruction. I think the more simple you keep it, but repetition. And again, like it could be chalk line and tees for me. It could be the string for somebody. It could be the mirror with the lines that you roll it from. It could be any of those, right? But find one that you like, right?
Yeah.
And do it.
I love it. Well, that brings us into the Back to Basics putting segment. TM15 discount code below. Support the people that support us. Tony, mate, you've been fantastic. I want to let you go. I could talk like this all day.
I appreciate you. Appreciate you having me. I appreciate the support. Anytime I could ever do anything for you, please let me know.
You're a legend. Thanks, Tony. Take care.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.